everyone. Thank you and welcome to another episode of Hour of Healing, where each week we talk about thought provoking and life changing topics that are engineered to help you find healing no matter what you are going through or what you are facing. Today we have another big topic to discuss today. But before I tell you about the topic, let me reintroduce to you our guest. For those of you who followed us in season 1, we have with us our sister Rachel Dami Odoinwu, who is a mother, a businesswoman, and most importantly, a woman of God. She is the co-founder and the CEO of Purpose Connect, which is a platform that is engineered to helping immigrant students find work or connect with various companies here in the United States. She is also a public speaker. In her own way, has been impacting a lot of the various communities around here in the Missouri area and also around the United States. Friends, just a fun fact about the good work that Dami and her company is doing in this area. Her company just got nominated to a $1 million prize competition as semifinalist. So we wish her all the best and we pray that she comes home with that 1 million because I will be visiting her soon. Friends, today, as I said, we are talking about discovering your purpose. Now, whenever any of us hear about discovering your purpose, some of the questions that we ask ourselves is, what is this about? Is it just about our purpose in business, in family life, in business life? Whatever it is, Dami is here to help us understand this and point out some important questions for us. So, Dami, I will throw it to you so you can set the stage for what we will be discussing today. Discovering your purpose. What is this all about?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joe, for bringing me back on. I'm happy to be back and I'm excited to be talking about purpose. It is my number two thing to help people discover in life. Or it's the number two thing that I'm passionate about in life is helping people discover themselves. I myself, I discovered my own purpose as a young girl, and I can tell you that everything that I'm doing in life really does revolve around discovering my purpose. And I honestly cannot express how much it changes one's experience through life when you're really walking in your purpose. And so that's one of the things that really excites me. I think very early on, before I began to help people discover themselves and discover their purpose, I just, I was in that place, almost like I was in cloud nine of, I have this confidence that I'm approaching life with everywhere that I walked into, every job that I took, every ministry that I've been a part of. There was always that excitement and that like sense of ground. It was like I felt grounded
Wow.
in my pursuit. And whenever I looked around and saw that people were walking through life in frustration, it really weighed on me because I wanted them to have what I had. I wanted them to have what I was experiencing. I remember
Yeah.
that day vividly. It feels like yesterday, even though it was like a decade ago. I'm looking around and I'm going, how can people get the same thing that I've gotten? I remember making a move all the way from the East Coast down here to Missouri,
Correct.
and it was all tied to my purpose. And I
Wow.
remember I would sit in my class and I would have visions. And I mean, like, who sits in class? You're supposed to be downloading
Pay
what the
attention.
teacher is, teaching you. And literally, my purpose was so reflected in the things that I was doing in the classes that I was taking that
Wow.
I was there taking notes from my teacher, but I was also taking notes of the visions I was seeing,
Wow. Wow.
you
That's
know.
powerful.
And so to walk away, I remember just getting out of class one of those days and I was so excited. I called a friend and I was like, my goodness, it doesn't get any better. When
Wow.
you're like just living life knowing that this is where what it all amounts to. This is where it
Yeah.
all matters. And that's what purpose is. It's the thing that matters. And for many people, this is different. I've had people that I've worked with, and when I sense that they're Christians, I take that approach because, guys, there is a God purpose and there is your own purpose.
Yeah.
And when I have clients and people that come my way that I'm trying to assist and help in discovering their purpose, I tell them, I say, I could tell you everything in this life. I have the things that the components I will share, the things that I will share that helps them to discover themselves. But ultimately, where it comes down to for us children of God
Mm-hmm.
is, what is God's purpose for our lives? What do we feel
Mm.
like God has put in our hands, in our lives to do? That thing that like really helps us to walk through life, knowing that we're walking through life, ho- you know, still keeping our hands in God's hands and walking through life with Him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that really is when I take it from the Christian standpoint, that's really what it comes down to. Purpose is that thing that you do alongside God, that no matter what it is, no matter what roads you're turning on the way, it all amounts to what He has called you and what He has positioned you on earth to accomplish. Do.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much. And audience, I can't wait to actually release the video component of this recording. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, I know we'll be releasing the podcast first, but she is glowing talking about discovering her purpose. And I usually, I mean, after doing this for a few years now, um, 2 years to be precise, I've had the privilege of interviewing various guests. And you will see as an interviewer when you have hit the question, when you have hit the place where the excitement comes from. And just with her talking about discovering her purpose and being in college and having visions, she was just glowing. And I am so excited. I think I'll probably release the video with the audio at the same time because I think audience actually will appreciate getting to see how you glow when you were talking about your purpose. And thank you so much for defining purpose for us, Adami. But I will dive us right into some questions that do come up when we talk about this subject of purpose. Because in my little experience now, I have not done a lot of life coaching to the scale that you and your company does. But one of the things that usually you will find is whenever people are talking about purpose, it sometimes seem as though they just talking about passion. So is there really a distinction between what one is passionate about and what one's purpose is, or is one and the same? Uh, that will be my first question for you.
There is a distinction between what one is passionate about and what one's purpose is. Oftentimes, you'll find that the passion, if it is grounded in something that is, that has like the power to change the world and change, yeah, a lot of times when you say change the world, people think it has to be one grand change, but oftentimes the thing that you're passionate about is tied to the fulfillment of your purpose, but they are not the same. They're different, but they are interconnected.
So then, what would be one of some of the things that will make sure, because when you said that, but when you are passionate about something, if it is in congruence, if it's in agreement with fulfilling your purpose, so what will be some of the things that our listeners will need to know about the things they are passionate about, but may not necessarily be tying in into their purpose?
Okay. So what I can do is I can share my experience of, where all of those come in, the things I'm
Absolutely.
passionate about, and then the thing that I know is my purpose.
Mm,
So I shared earlier that when I discovered my purpose, it literally informed everything else that I was
correct.
doing. So for me, if I, get asked by anybody, Dami, what is that thing that you consider your purpose and your calling in life? For me, that thing is going around the world and making sure that people are able to receive the ministry of the good news of Christ through healthcare
Mm,
access, right? People receive the ministry of Christ and the good news of Christ through healthcare access. I'm a medical missionary. I'm going to be a medical missionary until I die. That's the work that the Lord has put in my hands and he has said, go and do. Right? When you were introducing me, you introduced me as a co-founder of Purpose Connect. Has
correct.
nothing to do with medical missions,
Mm,
right?
mm,
But one of the things that I'm also passionate about is helping to transform the workforce,
mm, mm,
right? Now,
mm.
that is a passion of mine, has nothing to do with my purpose
Wow.
as a medical missionary. In fact, when I was taking myself through what I now call my program that I take clients through, I didn't even know that it was going to become a program. It was just, oh, here's what your experience has been in life. Here's how it translates into putting a structure in place that can actively help people discover themselves and discover their place on earth.
Mm,
Because that's what purpose is. You discover what your place on earth is. And for me, the first part of it was discovering that, or knowing that this is the road that God has called me to. I remember just sitting in my living room back when I lived in Nigeria. And it was a few months, in the process. I had become a born again Christian and I kept asking that question, Lord, what do you have for me on earth? What do you have for me
mm.
to do? And it took several months, but the hunger was there because I no longer was content just going through life like it didn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I committed to seeking God. And that's why I was talking about how it's important that the purpose that you're living in your life, that it is actually God given if you
Mm,
are a Christian. If you're a child of God, that is it just doesn't get any better than aligning yourself with God. And so I spent several months, and I remember that day, like again, like it was yesterday. I'm sitting in my living room in Nigeria, and it was like a movie. I'm
wow.
I'm I'm much more a seer, than I'm a hearer. And so that's the other thing is you have to be able to determine what is an effective way for you to be able to receive what God is trying to show you. That's
Mm,
a big part of it. And I remember sitting in my living room and, I had previous experiences before this. I was 14. We had a family friend that needed blood transfusion, and his mother could not find the funding for him to receive blood. So she leaves Joseph at the hospital, goes in search of funding, and when he came back to the hospital with some of the funds, Joseph had passed. He was 20, you
mm.
know. So I remember I was 14 and I just couldn't wrap my mind around how somebody would lose their life because there was no funding.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that right there became a passion for me,
Absolutely.
right? And so when I began to ask God, Lord, what do you have for me on earth? What do you have for me to do? He brought that to remembrance.
Mm, mm.
And it played out all in the vision that he showed me. And I remember grabbing my computer and I started typing everything that I was
Wow.
seeing in the vision.
Wow.
you know and this was what, 2007. I didn't end up taking the step and launching my medical nonprofit until 2014, 7 years later. And that's the other thing is is your purpose is not going to immediately just teleport you into the fulfillment of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your purpose is going to put you in that place where God wants to see what is your willingness, what is your commitment to bringing this to pass. I mean, sometimes it's he'll, when he's talking to you, when you go back to the scriptures and you look at Moses leading the children of Israel, right? That was very much, I mean, we're not sure what the timelines and things were,
All right.
but you know he called him to lead the children of Israel. He empowered him to lead the children of Israel. So I remember when I was like seeing the vision, I'm going, Lord, what is this thing you are showing me? I'm in Nigeria. How am I supposed to accomplish this thing that you're telling me to do? You know what happened? Literally by the end of that year, I ended up winning the visa lottery
Wow. Wow.
that I did not put my name in.
Mm.
Somebody else submitted my name,
Wow. Wow.
you know,
Talk about
and
miracle.
that was like, you don't get any more solid confirmation than that. It was like, wow, okay, I know I was questioning this vision that you put in front of me, but you're literally, it was like God put it in front of me, and then he empowered me to be in the environment that was going to help me bring it to pass. you know and so for me, everything that I've done from that point forward has literally revolved around that moment when I received that vision and when I knew that that was God's purpose for me on earth. Now, as I have gone ahead and as I have just journeyed through life, I've also had several other things that I'm passionate about you know come to light. And one of those was helping people discover themselves. One of those is transforming the workforce, transforming the
Correct.
workplace. But neither one of those things are my purpose. They're just things that I'm passionate about. They're things that, from my perspective, I believe that God has blessed me with those things as a way to further increase my capacity to bring the purpose to pass.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, I can go on, but I want you to respond to that.
No, so thank you so much, Dami, and we will pick up on that. There are a few things that I think is worth pointing out based on what you're sharing with us, and in sharing your story, you share very profound virtues with us. Some of these virtues, patience, you shared that with us. That it took about 7 years. We live in a time and an age where when people one, most of us don't know our purpose, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. But those who have been fortunate to know what their purpose is, they want it to happen overnight. And so you did mention the virtue of patience, that discipline. You said everything that you are doing now, the very last bit that you said that is to increase your capacity for your purpose, which I think is so important because we will find out in our conversation, and I will be asking you to shed some light on it, that purpose grows, purpose enlarges. And so I'll be asking you to shed some light on some of the ways that we will grow our purpose or enlarge it, our vision, and things like that. You also talked about determination, which I think is very, very important in a social media world where everybody wants to be everybody else. That having the determination is very important. And you also talked about something that from the Christian's perspective, I think is very powerful. I would say most Christians know that in theory, but we don't really apply it to the actualization of our purpose, and that is God made the way. I mean, we sing about it, we hear about it, we talk about it, but when you sit down with people and you begin to talk with them about their journey in life, you will realize that a lot of Christians actually don't apply this to their destiny actualization. That if it is God's will, then it is His bill to foot the cost. Most
Yes.
people live life, and you can shed some more information on this, Dami, if I'm wrong, or even what you think about it when we're done. But most people in life, we're talking about Christians now, and we will talk about non-Christians and purpose in that regard too. But most Christians, I find that we want to know what God has said, which is great. But once we hear what God has said, we don't take the time to find the strategies that God wants to use to bring those things to pass. We pick what God has said and we run with it to do it our own way. And you can shed some light on this about whether this is also been your experience, because sometimes my experience is pretty different. I don't want to say weird, but sometimes my experiences with Christians are different. But that is something that I have noticed, that we take the time to seek God to know what His will is or His word is, but we don't seek the strategy, the day by day or the month by month, the things we need to do. Has this also been your experience as well when you observe Christians?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that just because God has given you that purpose now does not mean that then you disconnect from Him in actualizing that vision. At the end of the day, it's His purpose. It's not, you are in partnership with Him.
Yeah,
And when you're in partnership with God, you really do things with the consciousness of, I mean, think about going into business partnership, right?
mm,
You don't make business decisions without your partner's input.
absolutely.
And so when you go in partnership with God and you say, Lord, yes, send me. I want to bring this to earth with you. You don't, then jump ship and say, okay, I can make this happen by myself, because that is flat out our human pride right there.
Mm,
You
mm,
know, the knowing your purpose is not equal to knowing the way to actualize your purpose.
yes.
And one of the things God told me very early on, when I first knew that that was my purpose, was when I place an order, I pay for it. That was why when you said, I was like, absolutely. When you're walking in your God-given purpose, God pays for the things that He is assigning you to do.
If it's His will, He will
Yeah,
foot the bill.
He will foot the bill. He will totally foot the bill. I remember my very first year as a medical missionary in 2014. That year was the year that Ebola hit,
Oh, yeah.
you know. So initially there was all the uproar about Ebola and, the dangers of going to do medical missions in Nigeria and all of that.
Mm,
And we were a lot slower preparing for that, funding wise.
correct.
When it became evidence that, we could still go, we could still do this, it became a question of, well, so how do we fund this now? I mean,
Mm,
we had thousands of dollars worth of supplies that we needed and we didn't have the resources for.
ah,
And I remember just thinking, I said, okay, maybe I can pull this out of I started thinking about my account. I said, maybe if I pull this amount from this account, I might be able to fund this. So I got on Amazon. I started looking for some of those supplies, and I was trying to buy blood pressure machines and cuffs and all of those. And I remember I had questions about the cuffs because we were serving a community with about 3,000 residents, and half
wow.
of the community were children. So
Mm,
we wanted to make sure that we had, equipment that would
yeah.
work for the kids in terms of size. So I reached out to the company on Amazon stating that, hey, we were doing a medical outreach, here's our question. I got a reply back from the rep saying, "Oh, did you mention that this is for a medical outreach? We actually have a missions arm in our in the company, and we might be able to fund all of it."
Wow. Wow.
I mean, as I'm speaking about it, I'm still having goosebumps,
Wow.
you know. And I remember, the missions coordinator, she called me. We were on the phone for an hour because they start asking you questions to get to know the work that you're doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
better. And literally by the end of that call, she said, "Okay, we're going to send you all the things that you were trying to order at no cost, and we will express ship it to you."
Wow.
I mean, guys, I'm talking about $3,000 worth of
Goodness.
supplies
My goodness.
that I was going to pull from my personal resources that was already limited because I still had to pay for my flights and everything,
Oh.
you know. And God just opened the door.
Mm.
And that company, every year when we went on a medical missions trip, they have donated supplies.
Wow.
It became the beginning of a relationship that I never would have thought in my wildest dreams. I could not have attained that, you know, relationship by my own doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. So that's the thing, and it goes on and on and on. Like, I talked about my businesses, and when I started to think about going into business, actually before I even talk about the business, you get to a point where and there's pride is a thing, you're like, "Oh, this is the thing that God has put in my hands. It needs to be, funneling through me and my name and my organization and all of that." As I went on in the process, I still have my organization still does a lot of work. We still do year-round programs in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria to be specific, where we have an emergency patient assistance program. And then we go from time, we have some educative programs as well. We've done like some education on like developmental disabilities, and those types of things. It has taken different forms, but right now in northern Nigeria is the year-round emergency patient assistance program with occasional medical outreaches. And on the global side of things, I began to think I really want to. Even you mentioned how it grows, right? I wanted to be able to do more to reach other parts. Obviously, my tie to Nigeria was that I was born and raised there,
Sure.
and that is for me, that is home. And I really wanted to be able to start from home. But as things kind of, as the years went by, I started looking at, well, how can I enter into places like South America? How
Right.
can I start doing work in South America? Because there are needs in those parts as well.
Right.
And you can't go to those places when you don't know people. So we started opening ourselves up. We started going to medical missions conference in Kentucky. We started forming a lot of relationships, and then God really started putting on my heart that He wanted me to have a spiritual covering. You know, wanted me to have a spiritual covering. I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I knew it was like, okay, maybe a church body that's sort of like the spiritual covering for us, but at the same time, I didn't know what it meant in terms of like operationally. How are we going to work? How are we going to function? Guys, as I'm speaking to you, I do medical missions every single year. I'm getting ready to go to Honduras in October,
Right.
and it has nothing, my name is not on it. It's not my organization, it's my church. It's purely my church. And the funny thing is, when God first put it on my heart and I started presenting the idea of, leading medical missions at our church, it didn't work out. It took years. That's the thing. When you're walking through your purpose, you have to learn that patience I talked about initially. It's gold. You
Mhm.
have to learn it because I really, really had to step back and I said, at the end of the day, God's the one that put this in my hands. He's the one that called me to do this, and I will do the bits that I have the ability to do wherever, you know. And so I waited, and I honestly wasn't even expecting anything to come out of it. Guys, I'm talking years. When I finally started leading the medical missions at my church, I did not talk to anybody. I was driving to work. My pastor called me and was like, we really want to, we really, really want to start to commit ourselves. They'd been doing ministry, missions that was just purely ministry. And now they were considering adding medical to it. And he said, well, I couldn't think of anybody else but you. Literally, I could not think of anybody else but you. And that's how I've been doing medical missions now for the last few years.
Wow.
Has been, I do the recruiting. I find all the providers to go. I've even asked you, Joe, several
Correct.
times to consider, find the providers to go. I find the supplies. I source the supplies, all of those things. And on the supply side, if we have to pay for the shipping, if an organization is donating, my church is paying for it, you know. And I mean, and I'm still living in my purpose, guys. But when people look at, you know, the the medical mission trips we're taking, they look at that it's oh, it's abundant life church, right? I have, for me, that's the biggest thing is mission. What is the like this like will be the one that God has done to there are some people that they don't think that their purpose will put them at a lower hierarchy within an organization. You know, your purpose can literally place you at the mid level. It can place you at the entry level. And during that time period, this thing is me fulfilling my purpose. And you can stay there with joy and gladness and experience the growth that comes within the confines of that position that you're in. So, but I'll stop there.
Well, I just wanted you to just keep going. When we were about to start, I said we should freestyle this, and you didn't want to, and now it's just freestyle.
I'm
But
just freestyling.
but thank you so much. You've hit on a lot of important things that I actually have questions written on about. But I want us to wrap up on I would consider this as a laying foundation and also exploiting some of these things. And then we will pick up on the part two of this conversation, which will air next week. I want us to actually pick up from the area of purpose and providence, because you did touch on it a few times actually, and it was one of the things that I had written down. So we will talk about that. But you've mentioned some really powerful things in this section already, Dami. You talked about the fact that patience is gold, and we will explore that because I have a bit of a little bit of a story that I want to share with that. And also, you talked about how pride can restrict our purpose. And I think that is so powerful. So if you don't mind, in part two, I actually would like you to pick up from there and reiterate how pride can and does restrict purpose. Because sometimes if care is not taken, people think that because I have discovered my purpose, I should be at the top. And I think it's a scheme of the enemy sometimes to deprive us from actually walking in truth in our purpose. And so I would like us to pick up in part two from there, if that would be okay with you. But audience, we want to thank you so much for joining us today as we started this conversation on discovering your purpose. As you can see, there is no doubt that there is a lot of healing when it comes to the realm of purpose and living a life filled with purpose. So I pray that you will be able to join us same time next week as we pick up on this conversation, and also share with your loved ones about some of the things that you will hear. A patient of mine told me this over the past couple of weeks. I think it was about 3 weeks ago, that they are so thankful about some of the things that we talked about because it has made such a huge difference in their life. And I did not even know that they listened to the podcast. So I am so grateful to Dami for sharing her life experience, but also unlocking some of these key concepts. And I don't know if we will get time to pick up on the business part of purpose, but we will do our very best. So we will see you same time next week. God bless you, and bye-bye.